welcome to the December 3rd, 2025 meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission. I'm your chair, Jeffrey Barton, and we'll begin with roll call.
Thank you. Chair Barton.
Present.
Commissioner Bell.
Present.
Commissioner Broll.
Present.
Commissioner Cycle.
Present.
Commissioner Zevskaya.
Present.
And Commissioner Faircloth.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Palmquist, and welcome Commissioner Broll to the Planning and Zoning Commission. Glad to have you, and thank you for your service.
Thank you.
We will begin with our land acknowledgement. As we are gathering today as the Planning and Zoning Commission, the body tasked with reviewing and advising As we are gathering today as the Planning and Zoning Commission, hot mic.
Should everybody turn off their mic except his?
Test, test. Sounds better. So I guess with the new mics, push to turn on. Is that, so everybody has a push button on their mic. I guess we turn on and turn off when speaking. All right. No worries. As we are gathering today as the Planning and Zoning Commission, the body tasked with reviewing and advising on appropriate land use in the city of Asheville, it is fitting to acknowledge the storied history of this land. We occupy the land of the Cherokee people who have stewarded and been in relationship with these mountains and waterways from time immemorial. This land is occupied through violence, oppression, coercion, broken treaties, and forced relocation. Please join me in expressing respect and gratitude for the present-day Eastern Band of Cherokee, the Cherokee Nation, the United Gadua Band of Cherokee, and all of our indigenous neighbors, as well as the past and present marginalized community members, as we seek to join in the healing of the indelible trauma that is embedded in this land. Thank you. Moving into the administrative portion of our meeting, as a reminder for our guests and visitors, Planning and Zoning Commission accepts public comment on items that are on our agenda. We receive public comment in advance of meetings through email at pzcommissioners@asheville.nc.gov, and in person at the meetings, we accept public comment, which is limited to a maximum of 3 minutes per person or 10 minutes if speaking on behalf of a group. So for our public hearings, we will open public comment for those items. Next up, we have the approval of minutes from the October 1st, 2025 meeting. Any discussion, or do I have a motion to approve?
I move to approve the minutes.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. As we move into the next item on our agenda, updates from committee liaisons and work groups, one item in the minutes that we just adopted was a definition of anti-displacement as presented by the anti-displacement work group. We all reviewed this at the last meeting and received a presentation from anti-displacement work group. Provided some feedback to add environmental relocation in alignment with the affordable housing plan for the city of Asheville. And it was contemplated that we would come back and formally adopt this definition. It's not part of the UDO or an approved plan, but can help guide and anchor our work through the anti-displacement lens in the future. So With that, I guess I would ask for a motion to adopt this definition.
I'll make the
Or-
motion.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Do we have any discussion from staff or feedback before we? Yeah. I saw some quizzical looks, so I just wanted to.
And I apologize for the quizzical looks because I wasn't at the last Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, so I was just trying to catch up. I think my question is around you as a body adopting a definition for which purposes, because we are working with city council members and eventually with the Legacy Neighborhood Coalition to have a joint discussion around what anti-displacement means. We do have definitions, working definitions, both in our affordable housing plan and missing middle study. And so as we are presenting as staff to say the housing, the HCD Committee of Council, we may be using a different definition. And so if we can just clarify what the purpose of you all adopting a separate, potentially a little bit different definition is, that might be great for the public and for staff. And I appreciate you doing this work.
Thank you. Any feedback from anti-displacement
Yeah,
work
so a
group?
couple of things. I think one, we started the anti-displacement work group and the conversations around this before staff started having conversations, especially with HCD and City Council. So it just took us a little longer to come up with a definition. I think timing now is really great where kind of all of these bodies are working on anti-displacement, so that's fantastic. From my viewpoint, it would be good for us to have one, for us as a commission to have an agreed upon definition so that when we are looking at projects, we know what we agree upon as far as what displacement is, just so we can have the same language when we're discussing projects. The other thing is that, in my opinion, it would be helpful to, when you're going to HCD or City Council or even in your internal definition conversations, to have this definition as a comparison. It's not to say that you have to use our definition, but it's something that, you know, we are recommending. We think this is helpful, and we want you to consider it in your conversations. Those kind of would be my responses.
One last comment, thank you so much for that. My one last comment is I think staff would like to have a conversation at some point around the usefulness and how to operationalize the piece that says defined census tract or within a city adopted neighborhood. Now, an example I'll give you is we worked a lot with displacement this year on physical displacement along the rivers. None of those are census tracts or adopted neighborhoods. And so just digging down deeper, we're excited to do that work with you. Okay?
That's great.
I'd like to hop in here, and I understand that staff's working on, and the city's working on their own definition of this, but I think there are people on this board who are doing some other stuff right now, and what I might suggest is even if we call this like a working definition or an interim definition, we can always change later to what the city is, but I think for people here to keep moving forward, we need at least some kind of baseline of like, so if we call it just a working definition or something, that doesn't bother me. I don't know if that bothers the rest of the commission.
Yeah, I would agree. I think by nature that it's not part of an adopted city plan. It's kind of just an affirmation of the work of anti-displacement work group. I think it is a working definition. I think the goal of bringing it to the full commission for some level of adoption is to do exactly what we've talked about, establish that baseline shared understanding to help with the future conversations. So, yeah, I appreciate staff's feedback and kind of look forward to kind of continuing the conversation. Clearly, anti-displacement is a critical and important lens when we talk about land use, so continuing to have a shared understanding of what that means is useful to me.
I just wanted to comment that
One thing that might be confusing is we're adopting the new rules of procedure tonight, and most now, under the new template, most boards are not allowed to have even work groups without staff agreeing and all of that. But I did check it with staff and say, these work groups are working as work groups, which we all understand to mean sort of unofficial, not tasked with anything in particular by the overall commission. And so the only thing that complicates it a little is when the overall commission is adopting, I think the working definition might be better. It might start to get into that role of, oh, this is an official committee. Whereas we have a stormwater work group, which is gathering information and comes and reports generally on either policies, existing policies, things you see that relate to stormwater, but you don't have a particular task. And I don't think even displacement, we know you're working with communities, but there's still not a specific task. So I think it's fine for you to continue with these work groups. I haven't heard otherwise from staff or any members of the council, but that's one thing about making this perhaps a little less, a working definition, so that when you're speaking about your displacement work, everybody has that common understanding. Okay.
I like the idea of calling it a working definition. I am wondering if we could add a phrase at the end to something like a defined region, or I also had an issue with kind of the specificity of census tract or adopted city neighborhood. I feel like we need a third, and other region and other, clearly defined area. Could we add something like that?
I would make the friendly amendment to the motion to add a third classification of other defined area, yeah. I think that's a good suggestion. Would you accept that, since it was your idea?
I would. Commissioner Zwaifskaya, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's fine with me.
Okay, great.
So we have amended motion and a second. Any further discussion, or should we take a vote on adopting this? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So the working definition of displacement has been adopted. Thank you. Next up, we have some other committee liaison and work group updates. Anti-displacement work group, obviously the informal, unsanctioned composition of it was comprised of Commissioner Zajewska and Commissioner Wheatley, who is no longer on Planning and Zoning Commission. So just kind of putting that out there that the work continues and is still important. Anything you'd like to add, Commissioner Zajewska?
A couple of comments, and I guess I'll start off with a question. One is, are any commissioners interested in joining the anti-displacement group?
And that can be, followed up directly after the meeting, since the commission doesn't seat a working group, but consider an open call for volunteers to join the work.
And then another question I had maybe for legal is, can we invite non-commissioners to be on this informal working group?
I don't really think so. I mean, it's supposed to be members of this commission that are reporting back to this commission. So, I guess you can talk to whoever in the community you want to inform, but I wouldn't want others feeling that they are a member of this commission or some official body. So if you're able to, in the work you do, and I'm sure you are talking to neighborhoods and people to get information, But, and you can bring that back, but I would not call them a member of your working group. If that,
Okay, yeah, thank you. So I guess I'll just kind of close out with a comment to say, obviously Commissioner Wheatley was on the anti-displacement work group, and it was the two of us. I am pretty disappointed in the process of the removal of Commissioner Wheatley and just how that all played out. I was surprised to find out after the fact that it happened, and obviously I now don't have an anti-displacement work group partner. So I just, again, want to kind of reiterate the call to have somebody on that work group with me. And I'll most likely also make some written comments around the process and how we have conversations in the future about commissioners who may or may not be removed.
Appreciate that. And we do have an item later in the agenda to talk about rules of procedure updates. And as a reminder, we all are appointed by City Council and serve at the pleasure of City Council. So, correct. That's it. Thank you, Commissioner Cycle, for that clarification. There are members appointed by the Buncombe County Commissioners. So we do have our friends representing Buncombe County serving alongside us. But point being, we are not a self-governing body. We are appointed and serve at the pleasure of those who appoint us. So we can have a deeper discussion and the rules of procedure around that, but appreciate the comment.
I will say, as far as getting someone else on to work with you, I am happy to work with you. If you need help, I will just caution that, like, I don't have a lot of spare time to bear, so if no one else will join you, I'm happy to help, but I don't know how many man hours I can really dedicate to you on a month, but if no one else answers, give me a call.
All right, thanks all. Last item on committee liaisons, Commissioner Wheatley was also serving as our liaison to Multimodal Transportation Commission. So that is now an open liaison. We will put it on the agenda for our next meeting, seeking volunteers to serve as that important connector with MMTC. So just wanted to note that for next meeting.
Is that the only other board where we have a liaison?
We have, I'm blanking on
There's
the
like
name.
one other.
Commissioner Cycle is a liaison to a board that does not really meet, consider appeals to stormwater.
It's like soil and stormwater. They've never met
Okay.
since I've been the liaison.
And as far as I know, those are the two kind of city sanctions liaisons from Planning and Zoning Commission. We can consult with the clerk's office if there are others out there, but those are the ones that I'm aware of that are kind of official. There are obviously some other unofficial, community liaisons. The Legacy Neighborhoods Coalition has requested some enhanced liaison support from a Planning and Zoning Commission member, but. All right, anything else on work groups?
So we don't have an update from the stormwater floodplain work group, but I do have a question for staff, and you may not be able to answer this now, but I'm just going to pose it. Are there any updates on the grant application to be able to do some large-scale revisions to UDO components relating to floodplain, stormwater, hazard stuff?
Excuse me. All right, let me get the mic right so I don't cause massive feedback. Yes, we can give you some updates. I know that we are planning to give a more formal and thorough update on that in January at a meeting of this body. So what I can tell you now is we are working through the application process for community development block grant disaster relief funds, as well as hazard mitigation program grant funds to secure funding to begin work on a limited technical update to the comprehensive plan and also a likely more intensive update to the development regulations of the city, focused directly on resiliency and tangentially on resiliency as well. But that is moving forward. We have staff dedicated to that weekly right now. And we hope to have, like I said, a more formal and helpful update in January.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Any other liaison committee work group updates? So next up, we have the election of vice chair. As a reminder back to, this was a continued item from our October 1st meeting. There were 2 nominations made for the vice chair position, Commissioner Wheatley and Commissioner Bell. We have had a change in the composition of our membership, and so I think it would behoove us to kind of reopen a call for nominations for vice chair. And before we do that, I guess, Commissioner Bell, would you like to take accept a nomination or decline a nomination?
At this time, I'm going to decline the nomination with much appreciation and of your faith in my ability, but not at this time.
Understood, thank you. So with that, I'll accept nominations for the vice chair.
And I would like to nominate Commissioner Cycle to be the vice chair.
Would you accept the nomination?
Yes, I'd accept.
Would anybody else like to make a nomination? Seeing none, we have an accepted nomination for vice chair. All those in favor? I would, could I
I'd
get,
like to
yeah, could
second.
I, yeah, no, thank you. So we have a second?
I'd like to second that nomination.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? We now have a vice chair. Thank you, Vice Chair Cycle. Thank you all for bearing with us through the administrative portion of the agenda. We will now move into our first public hearing item. First up, we have a request to rezone the property located at 13 Baldwin Street from neighborhood business NB to residential single-family high-density RS8. Property's PIN is identified on the agenda. The property owner is the estate of Doris Wilson Page. The applicant contact is Mr. Peter Zetterholm. The planner coordinating review is Will Palmquist. Mr. Palmquist.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, Commissioners. Will Palmquist with Planning and Urban Design. I will be presenting this rezoning request for the property at 13 Baldwin Street. Here is some quick facts on that. This is a straight rezoning request, so just changing the underlying base zoning district. There is no development proposed for this application. The property is about 1/4 of an acre. Staff is not recommending approval. We'll get into the details and the analysis of that in this presentation. So here is another view of the location, kind of more zoomed out on the left and then more closer in on the right. You can see the property is vacant. It is at the corner of Fairview Road and Baldwin Street in the Oakley neighborhood. The staff report notes that there is a bus stop across the street, and the Fairview Road is served by the ART bus route S1. So here is the existing zoning on the left, the neighborhood business district, and then the proposed zoning on the right, residential single-family high-density RS8. We'll get into some of those differences in this presentation shortly. You can see that that property kind of sits in the middle of this relatively small pocket of neighborhood business zoning, more commercial zoning to the east and north of the property, and then RS8 zoning surrounds the property kind of to the northwest and south. So here is the breakdown of the main components of the neighborhood business district and the residential single-family high-density district. Really the main difference here is the allowed uses of the districts. So neighborhood business allows for a very limited number of commercial neighborhood serving business-type uses. The only residential uses it allows for is multifamily residential, which is 3 or more units. So it couldn't be a standalone house or a duplex on this location with the existing zoning. The RS8 does allow for single-family detached as well as a more variety of residential uses, but does not allow for any commercial uses at all in that district. There's some other finer grain details. Neighborhood business does not require parking for residential uses, and most of the commercial uses where the RS8 has the standard 1 space per dwelling unit typically required. So going down into the analysis of the appropriateness of this rezoning request, first looking at the compatibility of the proposed zoning with the surrounding zoning districts. As mentioned earlier, the, I could get rid of this so you actually can see the text, but I'm scared to click on it. Sorry. So as mentioned earlier, a majority of the neighborhood surrounding the site is zoned residential single-family high density. You can see the purpose of that district outlined there on the slide. So staff does find that in regards to the surrounding zoning districts, RS8 would be compatible for the most part with the overall geography of the zoning of this area of the city. Looking more at the future land use map, as noted in the comprehensive plan, staff finds that this proposed zoning request of RS8 is partially compatible with the comprehensive plan. The neighborhood center land use description talks about, these small development corner store kind of uses within a neighborhood, limited residential uses as a component of the commercial development, so more of a mixed-use style development. It outlines some suggestions of what those uses could look like. Talks about restaurants and pubs, small retail or office, community-type uses, and that sort of thing. And noting that the RS8 district is cited as an appropriate zoning district within that neighborhood center future land use category. But reading into that description more is why staff finds that it's only really partially compatible with the comprehensive plan. No real consideration for infrastructure, as this rezoning request is not considering a development proposal. And then looking a little bit more at the comprehensive plan and some specific themes, goals, and strategies, staff finds that this rezoning could be consistent with the goal to increase and diversify the housing supply by promoting zoning policies that encourage more housing. So the RS8 does have a more variety of types of residential uses allowed within it. Staff does find that a few goals and strategies would be inconsistent with this rezoning. This includes increasing mixed-use development along transit corridors, increasing and diversifying the housing supply by expanding areas that permit high-density mixed-use development, and celebrating the unique identity of neighborhoods through creative placemaking, supporting the development of locally focused neighborhood amenities, including restaurants, pubs, and other neighborhood services, which I think really ties into that future land use description from the prior slide, speaking to the future vision of these types of areas of the city. So one pro of this rezoning identified by staff is that it would allow for the construction of single-family detached houses, which is not currently allowed under the existing zoning. And then the cons identified by this rezoning include that it does not allow, the proposed zoning does not allow for any neighborhood serving commercial uses that the current existing zoning does allow for by right. It also reduces the size and the potential impact of this neighborhood business node within the neighborhood. Therefore, looking at the overall kind of breakdown of compatibility of these various elements, for your consideration, staff does not recommend approval of the rezoning request. This rezoning is before you this evening. It would go, if a recommendation is given tonight, it would go before City Council for a final decision on a tentative date of January 13th. And staff has provided a couple different motions to consider, and I'd be glad to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Palmquist. Appreciate the presentation and the kind of analysis. We had some discussion of this in the pre-meeting around kind of the history of the zoning designation. A couple of specific questions I had. There was sort of, in staff's analysis, mixed compliance with the future land use map designation. Could you talk a little bit more about that and whether, if the zoning application were granted, would a change in future land use map be required in order to build single family or not?
Sure, that's a great question. So every future land use category, does have a list of zoning districts that could be compatible within it. In this case, the RS8 is listed as a potential district within that neighborhood center's future land use category. So for that reason, my take on that is that a change in the future land use would not be required because it is listed as a potential district within that future land use. It's more when you kind of read into the description of the future land use and the types of uses it's proposing and the character it's describing is how staff finds it to be not completely compatible with that future land use.
Got it, thanks. So the development of single family would be permissible in the current future land use designation. It's just staff's analysis that it does not 100% meet the intent of the future land use designation. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Yep.
Great. In looking at the current neighborhood business zoning designation, could you talk a little bit more about staff's analysis as to the appropriateness of that and the context within kind of this part of Oakley and the surroundings? Particularly in the pre-meeting, we talked a little bit about sort of the history of when neighborhood business was applied. So regardless of that prior history, staff's current analysis is that neighborhood business would be the most appropriate. And could you talk a little bit about what analysis factored into that decision?
Sure. So I wouldn't say that staff evaluated that neighborhood business is the most appropriate district in this area per se. We were just looking at really the change of zoning from neighborhood business to that RS8 district and thinking about the consequences and ramifications of that. Looking at the comprehensive plan, the future land use category of neighborhood center that it's under, and then the goals and strategies of the comprehensive plan, and really thinking about how the future development and potential for other kinds of neighborhood serving businesses would be lost under this rezoning, and it would make the zoning less compatible with that future land use category, and then some of the goals in the plan that really speak to these interwoven, small-scale, mixed-use neighborhood commercial nodes that can serve a local neighborhood, and a lot of the emphasis on the comprehensive plan about that, and that would be not consistent with this change of zoning, and really would I think foreclose on the opportunity to really strengthen this commercial node. If that was a future that wasn't really available under the proposed zoning. So that was kind of staff's rationale, really thinking about the compatibility of the comprehensive plan and the future land use category that speaks to those other kinds of uses being more of a neighborhood center, commercial center serving kind of hub.
Thank you. In reading the general description of neighborhood business, it does say it's established to reserve areas for low-intensity business activity. When it talks about the intent, it says to provide for the daily convenience and personal service needs of the surrounding residential neighborhood while minimizing conflicts with surrounding residential uses, and then goes further to describe these areas as places where large commercial operations are inappropriate. So I understand staff's analysis. It does feel that the intent of neighborhood business would be to retain small-scale commercial activity for the advantage of the adjacent and surrounding residential areas. And so, I kind of was thinking about that and determining whether the goal of neighborhood business was to preclude the residential areas or to truly preclude the large-scale commercial enterprises. In the case of this, it's a 0.22 acre parcel, so we're not going to see a large-scale commercial operation anyway. But I guess my question in that is staff's feeling that it's important to retain property for a hypothetical small-scale commercial use in this area?
Sure. So I guess whether it's hypothetical or not, I will say, staff has done some internal analysis, nothing super detailed, but really just kind of back of the napkin sketches, maybe a little more sophisticated than that, because we did want to try to understand if the site, is viable for a commercial use under the current zoning and what that could look like. Neighbor business does limit the footprint of new buildings to 3,000 square feet. And with some of the recent amendments we made to allow for some more square footage for residential uses on top of commercial, you could do 3 stories on top of that ground floor commercial and do a 12,000 square foot building, which is not very large. It's keeping within the character of that neighborhood business district. Based on setbacks, some of the required landscape buffers, it's possible to place a building on that site and perhaps have a driveway with some parking, which is not necessarily required under the zoning district. So there's the hypothetical of, on paper, could a potential building be sited on this site? I think the answer to that is yes. I think there are maybe some market realities that exist out there that is not part of staff's analysis necessarily, and we have not done a market study or consulted with developers on the site and that sort of thing, of course. I think that's a real situation for sure. So whether it's holding out for something that might not ever come or not, but we did do some analysis, and it is possible. The zoning does not preclude development within the neighborhood business district on the site as the parcel exists today. Whether that's feasible or profitable for a developer to do, it might be another question. But that's what I can say, I think.
Thank you. And last technical question for me. In the neighborhood business, there's a corner lot setback requirement of 15 feet. So is this considered a corner lot, and was that applied in your analysis?
Yes, so the 15 feet would apply off of Fairview Road. In this case, since the property, it's a corner lot, it would likely front on Baldwin Street. That would be probably where the access would be from. That'd be considered the front, and then the side corner lot would be on Fairview. You can reduce that front setback on Baldwin Street to 0 feet if you have a pedestrian-oriented building design and some other characteristics. So that helps get the building a little bit closer to Baldwin. It gives you a little bit more room to build. But the site is constrained by that 15-foot setback off of Fairview, and then also the 20-foot wide landscape buffer that's required for commercial zoning next to residential. Even with those considerations, again, it's a building size that is reasonable. It's not like a 10-foot wide building or anything. Maybe it's not an ideal geometry for whatever development or developer might come along, but it seemed like a feasible shaped building for construction.
And the 15 feet would be from property line, which we have a pretty excessive right-of-way width at this stretch of Fairview that doesn't continue to the adjacent parcel. So that 15 feet is really, say 30 feet from edge of roadway.
Yes, that is true. So the right-of-way is quite wide. 15 feet is measured from the property line. We did not consider any kind of, relief to any of those standards that could be pursued by a potential developer, like going to the Board of Adjustment for a hardship, requesting alternative compliance for landscape buffer widths, or even a special use, a conditional zoning application that could, provide technical modifications to the zoning. Those are all avenues where a potential hypothetical development could pursue in order to get either more buildable area or reduce requirements of the zoning and that sort of thing. So our analysis was just based on as by right under the existing zoning.
Thank you. Any other questions for staff before we allow the applicant to?
Yeah, I got one question. I mean, I got several comments, but I'm going to wait till after public comment. The one question I have, though, you'll see where I'm going, is a hypothetical. So, say the zoning is changed to a residential and someone does build a house there. I'm thinking of like Louise's Kitchen in Black Mountain. There's several businesses around town that have been converted into or residences in town that have been converted into a business later. Now, they don't go through and do like a zoning change to be a business, do they? I know there's like ADA code and other stuff that has to be done to be a business, and like business license, I understand that. But as far as zoning, where I'm going with that is like, say someone buys this, builds a house, does that stop someone from opening up doggy daycare or doggy wash or whatever small business would be in that location?
It might in this case. So anytime anyone's changing the use of an existing building from one use to another, you have to get a permit for a change of use, and that goes through zoning review and that sort of thing. So that is a chance for staff to review whether the proposed use is allowed in that existing zoning district. So the RS8 district allows for a very limited number of community amenities like parks and fire stations and that kind of thing. It would not allow for any kind of eating and drinking establishment or doggy daycare or any of those kinds of uses. So
For the record, I'm not trying to open a doggy daycare. That was just
we need more of them. Yeah,
the first thing that came to mind. But like, yeah, I'm asking because I've done some of these conversions professionally. So like, I know there is a process to make a business out of a former residential structure. So
It would in this case most likely require a change in the zoning from what's, if it was adopted as proposed.
okay, and always thank you, Will. I do appreciate your work on stuff here. I got comments, but I'm going to wait till after public comment.
Is it possible to show the plat, the survey, just so we can get a visual? I think it shows a lot.
I don't have it readily available. I have to sift through my emails to get to it. I can try to post it into the, maybe if we move to applicant discussion, I can post it into the public folder in the meantime, though, and we can pull it back up. Okay, glad to do that.
Thanks.
Sure.
Any other questions for staff before we invite the applicant to speak? Thank you, Mr. Palmquist.
You're welcome.
Would the applicant like to present? Please introduce yourself into the mic. And
My name is Peter Zetterholm. I work for 2020 Builders. Good evening, Commissioners. I'm here to request rezone for 13 Baldwin Street from neighborhood business to RS8, and that would allow for 2 single-family homes to be built on this lot. This request is fully aligned with the character of the Oakley neighborhood, and directly north of the parcel, the majority of Oakley is already zoned RS8. And the homes surrounding the site are single-family in nature. The proposed use is not only compatible, it matches the already exists around it. Importantly, RS8 is explicitly listed as an appropriate zoning district within the neighborhood center future land use category that covers this property. That means the city's own term and long use vision recognizes that residential development is suitable here, even inside a neighborhood center. While staff expressed concern about reducing the size of the neighborhood business node, I'd like to highlight a practical reality in this case. Parcel's vacant. It's been vacant for a while. Because of its size, shape, and corner location, it is unlikely to support any meaningful commercial activity or mixed-use development. Meanwhile, the existing NB zone business parcels to the east and west are already fulfilling the intended commercial role of this area. Approving the rezoning supports one of the city's most important policy goals, increasing and diversifying the house supply. Adding 2 single-family homes helps move the needle in a small but very real way, especially in a neighborhood served by transit, walkable streets, and existing infrastructure. This rezoning does not displace any current business. Apologies. Does not reduce economic activity and does not diminish the walkability or character of the Oakley neighborhood. In summary, this request is reasonable and in the public interest, compatible with surrounding development, and consistent with the city comprehensive plan. 2 new homes in this parcel will strengthen neighborhood fabric and utilize the property in a way that fits naturally within Oakley itself. For these reasons, I respectfully ask for your support and approval of this rezoning request. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Zetterholm. Any questions for the applicant?
Can you speak to the ingress, egress issues that you
Yes, ma'am.
foresee?
Yes, Commissioner Bell. We have found in our research that we can fit all required ingress and egress onto Baldwin Street with the road frontage that is currently available on that edge. Will be two 18-foot wide by 18-foot wide paths.
Residential.
Yes,
But
ma'am.
did you evaluate it for our commercial use at all?
No, ma'am.
No, okay, thank you.
I'm curious, thank you for what you said, but I'm curious, you said 2 units there, so would your, if approved, your plan would be to subdivide this, or are you doing a single family and an ADU, or kind of how are you approaching this?
It would be a subdivision, and we would fit 2 on each of their own lots with their own ingress, egress, nothing shared.
Okay.
And as an important clarification for members of the commission and public, what the application is for a straight rezoning request. So our objective as a commission, and with the intent of making a recommendation to council, is to consider all the potential uses that would be available if the rezoning request were granted. We can provide, informal feedback on stated goals of building single-family residential, but that's not the exclusive act of rezoning the parcel to RS8.
Thank you for clarifying that, and I understand that. I just,
Yeah, no, it's.
there's
yeah,
obviously an intent to do something with it, with the builder here, and I was curious.
Understood. Yeah, a rezoning often precedes placing it into active developments and, what would be permissible under the zoning request. So any other questions for the applicant? I'll just say, I appreciate the kind of context and the statements around the objectives, the suitability. I am, for one, sympathetic to this request. I would agree that it's a very difficult and challenging parcel to envision some small-scale commercial development. That's not to say it couldn't be done, but it has not been done, and what we know could be possible is to expand the available uses. So I am sympathetic to the request and interested to hear further discussion from my colleagues on the commission. Be seated. Thank you. Any other deliberation before we open for public comment? Further questions or clarifications of staff? Hearing none, we will open for public comment at 5:55. Please introduce yourself, and individuals have 3 minutes to speak.
Hi, I'm Charlotte Tomkowski. Good evening, Commissioners. Let's see, I'm the owner of the century-old family property, 17 Baldwin Street. I'm here requesting the crucial rezoning of the adjacent .22 acre parcel at 13 Baldwin Street. I feel like it's incorrect. This request is about preserving my family's legacy. Our family's been there over 100 years. I don't really particularly want anything commercial anyhow, but the market's already spoke. Nobody wants it that way anyhow. I need your approval to secure the future of my childhood home. Denial means I'll risk losing everything. I need to make critical immediate repairs on my home at 17 Baldwin. This land has never functioned as a business. It was always 17 Baldwin Street. And my proposal directly aligns with your body's recent push to eliminate mandatory single-family obstacles. You've emphasized that the goal is to increase housing density and provide more affordable options. I remember the planning director describing these efforts as a major milestone and a significant step towards taking a bite out of our affordable housing dilemma. My rezoning is a chance to execute that goal, even though it's on a micro level. My chosen builder is 2020 Builders, and they're ready to deliver. They're building 2 small, high-quality, 2-bedroom, 2-bath homes designed to be attainably priced for young couples and starter families. And it's exactly the missing middle housing that you're seeking. We don't need another store or a pub. We need safe places for families to live. We have a store right there. We've got the school elementary school right across the street. The business is simply impractical here. The lot's tiny. There's not enough room. The traffic is already intense enough on Baldwin Street. And Oakley Elementary School's directly across the street. Any commercial use would create a significant and dangerous conflict with school traffic. 2 small residential homes are entirely compatible with the character of Baldwin Street. They create 0 parking or traffic issues compared to a retail business or pub. Commissioners, your approval allows me to save my home. I feel like it corrects an error in the public record, and most importantly, provides 2 new units of much-needed affordable housing consistent with the Buncombe County 2043 Comprehensive Plan. I urge you to please approve the rezoning from NB to RS8. You'll be helping a lifelong resident and helping the entire Oakley community to continue to grow responsibly. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Do we have any other members of the public who wish to speak? Seeing none, we will close the public comment at 5:58. Further discussion, questions, deliberation? And did we get the plat?
Yes, Chair, the plat is now in the public folder for this rezoning request.
Thank you.
You can pull up on the big screen if you want.
I don't mind starting off and sharing some of my thoughts. I understand the future land use map and some long-term staff goals to kind of keep that urban center kind of intact. You know, because this is kind of in between that anchor institution and some other businesses. However, I feel like the reality of 0.22 acres, you know, just under 10,000 square feet, then you take out the setbacks and you take out parking. I mean, we're talking about 6,000 usable square feet at best of a business, which really, you know, that's a small restaurant or a large coffee shop. I feel like, it's my opinion that if there was that much economic desire for that there, it would have been taken already. So it's my opinion that I'm sympathetic to the applicant. And if there, you know, I know we're talking about a rezoning, but if there's obviously intent from a builder to act on that property in the near future, I think it seems reasonable to me.
Yeah, in a similar vein, I feel like I'm sympathetic to both causes. You know, at a 20,000-foot level, looking at the future land use map, it does make sense to be zoned NB, right? In Oakley, further down the street, there's an NB zoning that is, to me, when I've been there, you know, it acts as what it's intended to do. And I do believe, you know, there are uses that have been stated in this NB that's acting as such, you know, with the school, the church, the grocery, all that being there, it is acting as a neighborhood center. So I am sympathetic to it being zoned NB. But at the same time, with its adjacency next to, you know, the RS8, the CB1, you know, like, I feel like this could fall in multiple categories. And in a sense, we want to maintain a long view, the long vision, but also market realities in the now, I think, from time to time should play in, especially if, you know, we feel like this parcel could be one zoning or another.
So I am also sympathetic to the need for more housing and this being an opportunity to add more housing. So I actually lived in this neighborhood for 5 years, and I still own a home down the street. And I would walk from my home along Fairview. This was kind of my daily walk, and I would literally turn around right at at the school, at the fire station, kind of right here. Because this point, you can see in the way that the right-of-way is laid out, it's a transition zone from a highway and a really busy, very vehicular-focused area to a neighborhood and a really small street. It like chokes down very rapidly, and that can be quite a little traffic jam right there. So as much as, we want to promote more walkability, it is an awkward spot there, and most of the businesses are very vehicular based. There's a dry cleaner or a laundromat, a gas station, other places with really big, somewhat big parking lots. So I see the challenges of building on this site, given the size, just kind of the awkward location, and that it would provide a lot more value as housing.
Thank you. Any other comments, further clarifications, or questions for staff?
I'm prepared to make a motion if there's no other
Please.
comments.
Please.
I move to recommend approval of the rezoning request for the property located at 13 Baldwin Street from neighborhood business to residential single-family high-density RS8, and find that the request is reasonable, is in the public interest, is consistent with the city's comprehensive plan, and meets the development needs of the community, and that the request promotes zoning policies to encourage more housing.
I'll second. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, and thank you to staff for your analysis. So, sorry, let me pull the agenda back up. Next up, we have a request to rezone the property located at 137 Broad Street from Community Business 1 Conditional Zone, CB1CZ, to Community Business 1 CB. The property's PIN is identified on the agenda. The property owner is Broad Properties LLC. The applicant contact is Mr. Gregory Palumbi. Planner coordinating review is Will Palmquist. Mr. Palmquist.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening again. This is also a straight rezoning request for a property at 137 Broad Street, just north of downtown. You'll know its location as approximate to Taco Temple, if you're as much of a fan as me. Staff recommends approval of this rezoning, and we'll get into the details of the request. Here you can see a closer-in view of the site on the right. Fronts on Broad Street. The former Fuddrucker site is to the south, where a commercial expansion conditional zoning project was approved several years ago. Some of the history of this zoning, which is Community Business 1 conditional zone, is that basically the project site is two properties, 137 highlighted in the red, and then 135 to the west. In 2015, the western property came under a conditional zoning to build a two-story building, mixed use, which it did. In 2020, that conditional zoning was modified to include the property to the east, the subject property there that already had a building located on it, to redevelop into a new three-story building and make some adjustments to maybe some of the site features under the old conditional zoning and share a driveway and be a combined project at that point. In the intervening years, that project did not go forward. That other building was constructed on the original conditional zoning, but the property at 137 did not get redeveloped. There is that existing building there located today, and the request by the applicant is to rezone the property back to the original Community Business 1 so they can make use of the site under that zoning district, under all the uses allowed under that district. So, getting into the analysis of the compatibility of the rezoning request, you can see here a map of the surrounding zoning districts. You have some residential multifamily to the east and west. Charlotte Street is by and large CB1. Here in this color, there's some CB2 to the south, and then some office in the south as well. Staff does find that this proposal is compatible with the surrounding zoning districts. You can see the description of the CB1 district, which talks about business centers, workplaces, with significant pedestrian population nearby. Looking at the future land use map, the future land use category of the site is traditional corridor. That talks about a variety of land uses like commercial, office, and residential at a variety of scales. Kind of resembles a main street with buildings located close to the street. CB1 is cited as an appropriate zoning district within that future land use category. And for those reasons, staff finds that the zoning is compatible with the future land use map. There's no infrastructure analysis done as there is no new building or development proposed on the site. And staff finds that the proposed rezoning meets goals in the city's comprehensive plan, including to encourage responsible growth by ensuring that new development has the appropriate infrastructure to support it, and to facilitate real estate development that maximizes public benefit by establishing accessible and well-connected commercial nodes consistent with strategies outlined in the plan's growth areas. The pro identified by staff for this rezoning is that it would allow the existing building on the site to be occupied by a new use and provides greater flexibility for future uses of the property. There are no cons identified. For all those reasons, staff recommends approval of the rezoning request. It is before you this evening with a tentative City Council hearing date of January 13th. And I'm glad to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Palmquist. Any questions of staff? Thank you. Is a representative of the applicant here, and do you wish to speak? Please introduce yourself into the mic.
Greg Palumbi, I'm representing the owner. Ultimately, the conditional zoning was based on economics that are a little bit different now in terms of construction materials mainly. And so just want to go back to the use by right.
Thank you. Any questions of the applicant? If none, as a reminder, this is also a straight rezoning request, so we'll be contemplating the full range of uses that could be available under a new zoning designation of CB1. But with that, if there's no questions, I'll entertain a motion or comment. Oh, yes, thank you. Whew. I will open for public comment at 6:09. Seeing none, we will close public comment at 6:10.
Sorry, can I ask a quick question for staff? Is there, like for the conditional zonings, is there a mechanism by which like they could automatically revert back to the original use?
No, there really is not. There is stipulations in the conditional zoning that would, after a certain amount of time passes, would allow the planning director to initiate a rezoning back to a base district. That would still have to go through this still formal process, though. So as far as I'm aware, there is no way to automatically revert back to the base district.
And that mechanism can only happen if under a CZ, they never obtained a building permit, they never did anything on that CZ. But I have asked the question to be sure that splitting this parcel off from what the CZ was, all the CZ conditions for that can still be met. I think Will had mentioned some shared driveway, but that's all been, it's been determined that that can be a standalone CZ, meet those conditions.
So I guess there's an existing building there now, and by changing back to the zone, we're avoiding having to demolish that building. Well, it could be.
We're enabling
But the
broader uses.
original CZ, the plan was they were demolishing that building and putting something back.
That's correct. And that is the
I mean,
existing.
so now, I don't know. I feel like there's a potential to save a building and just like not throw something else in the landfill too. It's part of it.
Right. Yeah.
as well.
Yeah, I mean, looking back at the original conditions, there was an affordable housing component that, you know, then is lost as we do straight rezone. Any comments from staff about that, or?
So, yeah, and those commitments were just based on the percentage of the units proposed. So that was under the original development. I believe those still have the affordable units in them, but since the new ones were never built, that would be a provision that would be, I guess, null and void at this point, and those units would never be realized.
Any other comments, questions? Anyone prepared to make a motion?
I move to recommend approval of the rezoning request for the property located at 137 Broad Street from Community Business 1 Conditional Zone CB1 CZ to Community Business 1 CB1, and find that the request is reasonable and the public interest is consistent with the city's comprehensive plan and meets the development needs of the community, and that the request, 1, ensures the new development has the appropriate infrastructure to support it, and 2, establishes accessible and well-connected commercial nodes consistent with strategies outlined in the plan's growth areas.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? We have a motion and a second. Any further deliberation? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you and best of luck. Next up, we have a zoning text amendment, a request to consider a proposed zoning text amendment to the Unified Development Ordinance to amend Section 7-7-7 related to waiting periods for resubmittal of a withdrawn or denied application for a zoning map amendment, text amendment, development application, or request for development approval. Staff coordinating review, Carly Dillingham. Ms. Dillingham.
Commission. My name is Carly Gillingham. I'm an assistant city attorney here with the city's legal department. And I'm here to present this zoning text amendment that has become necessary in light of new legislation that directly conflicts with part of our UDO, which is Section 777, which currently imposes a 12-month waiting period for refiling approved or denied rezoning applications. I'll show you that exact language in a second. The new legislation actually prohibits any waiting periods from being imposed for withdrawn or denied development applications. So to the extent that our ordinance imposes a waiting period for denied rezoning applications, it is no longer in compliance with state law. So this is the language from the new legislation. It's from Session Law 2025-94, an act to provide regulatory relief to the citizens of North Carolina. The exact language that we're concerned about is pasted there. It says a development regulation or unified development ordinance may not include waiting periods prohibiting a landowner, developer, or applicant from refiling a denied or withdrawn application for a zoning map amendment, text amendment, development application, or request for development approval. And as stated before, this does conflict with Section 777 of our UDO. And the proposed amendment will bring us into compliance with this. So this is the proposed change. It is the very minimum to comply with the new state law. From a legal perspective, I am not kind of making any policy recommendations here. I'm simply trying to bring this into compliance with the new legislation. So we are striking the language that states that when an application for a zoning amendment has been approved or denied, we are striking the denial language, that this 12-month waiting period will apply. It will still therefore apply in the event that there is an approved application. And then there is a general statement of compliance with the new legislation pasted at the end. That's the underlined language. That directly mirrors that language from the new legislation from the last slide. There is a waiting period waiver in Section B of our ordinance. So again, this would only apply in the event that there is an approved application. Every UDO amendment does have to align with our comprehensive plan. This does because the stated goal of the plan is to work with the legislature as needed. So the pros are obviously allowing for statutory compliance with new state law, and also reducing the possibility of any confusion or inefficiency that could result from UDO inconsistency with state law. In the event that state law conflicts with our UDO, state law would be the one to be applied. And we don't want UDO sections that conflict with that, because then we would have to be consulting state law all the time. So staff does recommend approval of the zoning text amendment request for the reasons stated. It is tentatively scheduled for the January 13th city council date. And this is the suggested motion to approve, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Him, and really appreciate kind of the staff's proactive approach. This is a very recent new law, and so bringing UDO into compliance rather than waiting to be told to is much appreciated. Appreciate the explanation on why and what. The only question I'd have or would like a little insight on is retaining the waiting period for approved applications, and then even further, the waiver process. And
yeah, and I can go back to that language. It's a very narrow sort of scenario where this waiver would come into play. There would have to have been an approved zoning amendment, and then that applicant coming back and trying to submit a new application because they've changed their mind even though they got approved. They would have to get a waiver granted by city council if they wanted to do that within the 12-month period. And again, from the legal department's perspective, we were trying to bring this into the minimum compliance with the new law. I would defer to the planning department on kind of more policy-oriented analysis of the utility of having a waiting period for approved applications, but this is all that needs to happen.
comments from planning staff on the utility of retaining the approval waiting period?
I think that text is there now. So the approach is just the minimum change necessary to work. It's not changing a policy that's in place already, right? And the direction here was just minimum ordinance change necessary to comply with state law without making a policy change, if that makes sense.
Understood. And yet, while we're looking under the hood, it's hard to ignore, potential. I don't think this is a significant deterrent. I actually wonder if an approved application has ever been hindered by the waiting period or even pursued a waiver in staff's memory.
The only one I can recall from the last decade was not an approved, it was a denied application that came back on a council waiver, correct?
Yeah.
So that spans about 12 years at least.
Just unnecessary language.
That's my question is there true utility in retaining any portion of the section or while we are doing an update, perhaps consider striking the whole thing?
Yeah, if the commission did choose to take that route, that would strike 777 in its entirety, because there would be no use for.
I'm curious, what was the law before now? So was there anything saying about waiting periods? Okay.
On waiting periods.
And then my follow-up question is, if the law changed and this went away back to what it originally was, then would we come back and add the denial language back in? And I guess I'm asking that because if we strike everything and then the law changes and then we have to put everything back in, that's a lot of back and forth. But I don't know the possibility of that.
If the legislature decided to allow waiting periods again, we probably would have to put this back in if we chose. I know that the UDO is, obviously undergoing a deep analysis right now. So if staff determined that the waiting period has been helpful in deterring, application after application from the same applicant, then we would have to put it back in.
I guess one concern I have with retaining the approval language is would be then advantageous to have been denied or withdraw your application if after the approval, some modification or defect in the approval was found. And so that seems like a hindrance to having a good project that gained approval as opposed to having a sort of potential project that got denied. So, I do worry, the General Assembly is clearly interested in allowing property owners to pursue projects that council may not want to approve and give them some relief in a more timely fashion. So I don't know, why wouldn't we provide the same relief to someone who maybe discovered something about their site in the approval that needs to be changed or adjusted, but then is subject to a complicated waiver process or 12-month wait lockout? So.
My only kind of counter argument, I don't really know if it stands true here because it seems like there's only been one incident in 12 years, but I will defend staff a little bit. They're asked to do a lot and don't necessarily, or not like hiring new people and have tons of resources. So like some of these things are also like buffers to give staff time to do their jobs. And so removing these time limits, just takes away more kind of, it opens them up to having to do more and more work, which it's one project in 12 years. I don't think it's a deal here, but I'm always nervous when I'm taking away safeguards from staff's time. That's very limited. So I just want to voice that I care about y'all.
I was going to say, I'm sure that was the rationale for putting it in for all of these types, was to not immediately come back. In fact, when legal first looked at it, it's like, what developer is going to just have gone through this whole process and then immediately turn around and maybe turn in the same application? I guess you could, but it was just the legislature. Again, there's probably one instance where they just said that's too long to wait. But to your point, and maybe, get your name wrong, Zuzkaya, that sometimes it's nice to have a placeholder in there in case something you do want it. It does tend to go back to a way that was probably more favorable to the city.
I'm sympathetic to that point, but it does read as very odd to, if you were to come in, you didn't know all this background, as a lot of us don't know the background for a lot of the things that happened 10 years ago, and you have a waiting period for only approved projects. That reads very odd to me and does seem like it punishes projects that are positive projects that get approved that may want to come back and revisit something.
I think they'd have to come back, though, say it was a CZ. I think once you're approved, there's no, you are a CZ, so the only way you come back is as an amendment. I mean, you have to, because there's an amendment process, too. So they'd have to come back, I guess, as a completely different kind of application.
You're saying they wouldn't have to wait the 12 months?
That's what I was wondering.
No, because so if it was a conditional zoning, I think this would be right, Carly. If it's a conditional zoning that got approved and they wanted to, as you say, change, tweak something, they could come back for an amendment. It could be a minor amendment if it doesn't change the site plan, or it might have to be a major amendment if they really think that they, it usually takes a while for somebody to say, oh, I don't think we can do what we thought we were going to do. But I think this is more, they get approved and then they want to come back for a totally different application. But
I think that I can support what Janice is saying in practice. It doesn't usually happen within 12 months, but whenever someone comes back with a change or something to a council-approved plan, it's treated as a conditional zoning amendment rather than a new application, like 95% of the time. So if that's really a distinction here, then that would be how we would continue. I don't think we ever had anybody come back that promptly.
Yeah, because it says zoning amendment and then rezoning application. That is different from amendment to conditional zoning or conditional rezoning.
But say in the case of a straight rezoning, if, a potential use was contemplated and then somebody that had a property under contract fell out and a new use was desired, if that straight rezoning was approved, then that property owner would have to wait 12 months, whereas if that application had been denied, they could just turn around and apply under it. So that's, I think, what, yeah, so I hear you on the conditional zoning. It seems like this isn't a deterrent, but for a straight rezoning, it could present a strange unevenness or, you know.
I don't know the legislature's rationale in only including withdrawn and denied applications. I suspect they think, applications are, for example, withdrawn all the time to correct things that are learned maybe when they go before boards. And I don't know, maybe they thought the same grace should not be extended to approved applications, but I don't know.
Just curious, as a hypothetical with this new legislation, I mean, could someone just like every month resubmit the same application that's been denied?
Hypothetically.
So I'm just very curious.
Does this apply to straight rezoning and conditional rezonings? Yeah, probably already said that.
And the applicability on text amendments is a little, I couldn't wrap my head around that because that is also included in this, but that seems like it would, so if, a certain text amendment were approved but was later found to need some adjustment, usually if a city is initiating, but say it's, I don't know, that one is maybe a little confusing and too abstract to understand the implications on, but any thoughts, immediate thoughts from staff on text amendments?
Yeah, I mean, unless it's like a citizen-led text amendment, in that case, maybe it's more applicable, but again, it runs in the same logic of if it's denied, it can come back, but if it's approved, it can't for a year, so it is kind of that same illogical situation.
But there could be an entirely new text amendment that corrects a defect in an approved text amendment, right? So,
Right.
But it's the straight rezonings that I'm kind of struggling with because it does feel like that's an oddball to retain a waiting period for approval, approved.
I don't think this applies to text amendments because it's really weird the way it reads, but it says zoning amendment, but then it says no rezoning application. So a text amendment is not a rezoning application, right?
Right.
And it's not a zoning classification. So I think we are stuck with the most likely scenario is the straight rezoning that just wants to come back next month.
We never imposed any waiting period on text amendments, but that language is inserted straight from the legislation to say we are never imposing a waiting period, just for clarity's sake, on that list of items, which includes text amendment.
Understood, thanks.
Oh, I see.
I would recommend striking 777.
Are you
I
prepared?
would agree with that, yeah.
Would you like to make a motion?
I have different motion language on the slides.
Yeah,
We can amend it if you want to go to it now.
Should open for public comment too if we haven't already.
sure, yeah. Why don't we let's open public comment at 6:31. Seeing no one race to the mic, we will close public comment at 6:31. I would agree. I think, we've highlighted some compelling reasons to potentially just strike the whole section. We may need assistance wordsmithing a alternate motion on that, but
Would it be an approval with the recommendation of removing the whole section? So if staff could move forward with either option at this point?
I mean, we can test the vote. I think that it'd be nice to have a clear recommendation from Planning and Zoning Commission, and it sounds, I'd be prepared to support striking the section.
I move to recommend text amendment to strike section 777 of chapter 7, development of the city code of ordinance, the UDO, to eliminate waiting periods for resubmittal or withdrawn and approved applications for zoning map amendment, text amendment, development application, or request for development approval, and find that the proposed amendments are reasonable in the public interest, in that the amendments are consistent with the city's comprehensive plan and will bring the UDO into compliance with the new changes to state law, chapter 160D.
We have a motion. One thing as an important clarification and potentially friendly amendment, I don't know that I heard you say withdrawn or denied applications. You added the approval, but I want to make sure.
Withdrawn or denied or approved applications.
So is that acceptable as a
Yeah,
amendment to your
I
motion?
thought I said it. Yeah.
Maybe you did, yeah. So we have a motion. Did that pass muster? What's that? Okay. Do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. It passes unanimously. We have a recommendation from Planning and Zoning Commission. However, that may be carried to council. Appreciate staff's explanation and work on this. All right. And last, but certainly not least, we have consideration of amendments to the Commissioner's Rules of Procedure. Is legal presenting this, or are we kind of just discussing, deliberating?
I wasn't going to make a presentation. It's just with our new recovery boards, everybody's following this template. So I just took this template, which are, let me clarify, with some new boards, they don't have any rules at all. And so the city wanted to have consistency of rules among the different bodies. Planning and zoning has had rules that significantly mirror what are the best recommended rules already. Plus, your rules have some things that specify when you do quasi-judicial procedures, when you do legislative. So instead of adopting the whole template, I went in and took your rules as you've had them and then added in anything that was missing that is included in the template. Probably the thing to highlight, and you have the marked up version, is that these are coming out of the city's, this board needs to comply with the City of Asheville's rules of boards and commissions. And those were adopted by a resolution in June 10th, 2025. That's the template I'm talking about, just these general guidance on rules that each committee should have. And then when we get to the membership part, I had to rearrange things a little bit because most of them start with membership and yours started with the officers. But I think the other significant thing to point out is under members or membership, it talks there about the composition of the membership, and it has that language that each person appointed to serve as a member of the board whose appointment was made by the Asheville City Council shall serve at the pleasure of the council. And that was an ordinance that was adopted October 14th, 2025. It had just not been clear that that was the case. You would think that that would be clear, but the council felt it should make it clear that that's the way it works. And when we say serve at the pleasure, that means could be removed for cause or no cause. And that's how, for example, the city attorney serves, and as well as the city manager. They serve by statute at the pleasure of council. So those, I wouldn't say there's anything different. There is more contemplation in here of hybrid meetings. Technically, cities are really only supposed to have hybrid meetings in an emergency, declared emergency situation. But after Helene, most cities in North Carolina are continuing with this hybrid method. And after COVID as well, it was found that it really does help with participation. So the city has decided we will continue to allow hybrid meetings, but there's some rules here that say if it is hybrid, it has to, the public always has to be able to hear what is said. The public doesn't actually, under the statutes, have a right to always comment. That is something that this board has decided and other boards have decided to always allow. But, so people can participate remotely, except if it's quasi-judicial, because then we have to have the consent of the parties to the quasi-judicial matter. And if they do participate remotely, which this board really doesn't, but usually you always meet in person, but you could if there was necessary or one commissioner wanted to. We have to do a roll call vote. So that's something procedural that wasn't really there before because planning and zoning usually always met in person. And I wouldn't say there's anything else that, some boards didn't have conflict of interest. This board, it's still there. You have always had ones that were particular to planning boards. They're in the statutes. You can't have a direct, substantial, and readily identifiable financial impact on the member when you're voting on a matter, or you can't have a close familial, business, or other associational relationship. I kept that because yours are very specific, and then there's the other general rules. And now there's the part about subcommittees and work groups, which is for other boards, you really now, we're interested in making sure that that's very scaled back, and if there is a subcommittee, that it has to be, council priorities have to be met by it, and you have to have approval with the staff as well. But as I said, your working groups have been approved to continue. And so I'm sorry, yeah, I wasn't really, did you have questions? Yes.
Do working groups have to be approved or just subcommittees? Just subcommittees have to be approved.
Well, the language from the template, let me see, it's under the chair, because the chair has the ability to appoint subcommittees with the consent of the board. But then there's this part that says, any group or commission member, tries to explain what a working group is. Any group of commission members less than a quorum can meet informally together to discuss commission business without complying with open meetings law requirements. And this is the heart of why we really work on what's a subcommittee, what's a working group, because if it rises to the level of subcommittee, you're supposed to be meeting, you're open to public meetings law. But the commission must not, if you are one of these, we don't use the word working group, you're not formal, you must not vote. The commission must not vote to form the group or vote to charge the group. I'm sorry, this is on page 2. Or vote to charge the group with a specific purpose task that such actions would lead to the creation of a formal subcommittee, which would be subject to open meetings law or requirements. Did that answer your question? It
yes.
basically is saying you can have these other things, but that don't rise to the level of a subcommittee.
So to kind of follow up on that, because I was also trying to follow, the language is any subcommittee or similar subset group of the full commission must obtain approval from staff liaison, department director, et cetera. Is the intention that applies to working groups or not? Because later, it just, when it talks about what a working group is, it
Right,
just
no,
says it's
that-
an.
that- We had, so we had at one time 32 boards and commissions, and each one had different ones. So for example, I think it was the Forestry Commission. They didn't use workforce. They said, we'll have task forces. Well, that's not a subcommittee, they would say, and we'd say, but how's it functioning? But it's a task force. So they're saying if you have something that is voted to form by the commission and has a specific charge, whether you call it a subcommittee or something else, that's what needs to have approval of the staff and city manager and city attorney's office. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. And your work group, since you're not officially formed, but you do report and you go off on your own and talk about whatever you want to talk about and come back and report, those don't fall under this having to have official approval. Although the idea with forming these new committees was that there wouldn't be any of these subgroups. We would just stick with the commission. So that's why earlier I said, we've already discussed the fact you have these formed work groups, and you can continue to have your work groups even though they're not subcommittees. I just wanted to clarify.
Is there a
Made it more
waiting?
confusing.
Is there a waiting period if a request for a subcommittee is denied? Sorry, bad joke.
Yes, 1 year.
I got two other questions,
Okay.
unless y'all people were, unless we're still on that topic.
No, I'll go for it.
Yeah, I have questions as well.
Yeah.
All right, my two, just curious, item 3, section 3, item F. You scroll to it. Item F. Members of the
What-
commission may be disciplined or removed at the discretion of the appointing body. I understand that. I am just curious, what does disciplined mean? Is that I am suspended for a meeting? Is that a punitive fine? Is like, what does disciplined mean? Other than removal, obviously.
Let me find it.
Since you're not able to vote or participate.
I don't have to have a formal answer. I just
So, yeah.
want to know kind of roughly,
No, it's a good question.
what,
This
how
is-
big is the stick? I mean, like, what are you?
That's a good question.
I'm still trying to find, why am I not finding? E, F?
Section
Discipline?
3, item F.
Membership.
Members may be disciplined or removed at the discretion of the appointing body. So, yeah, discipline may be a warning,
I just, where I'm
Or
going
not.
with this is, I'm fine to accept this, but I think it's fair if I'm agreeing to be disciplined. I would like to know what that could be, or roughly escalating levels, like verbal warning, then gag order, then sit down with Janice. I don't know, just some kind of,
there's not really a grievance process. I mean, this is why, this comes from the template that everybody's accepted. So this is language that wasn't here before that we pulled in because of that pleasure of counsel. And as I've explained, pleasure of counsel means no cause, for cause, no, or cause or no cause.
and I'm not trying to,
And no, I
make
know
this
that there's
thing-
questions
This
about
is
how
stemming
this
from
happened.
currently what was going on last time, which, city council has my full support in their decisions, but on this board, some of the members here, including myself, felt like the lack of transparency was frustrating. And so if there is a clear level of escalation of things, it protects you as staff saying, hey, like, well, we did items A, B, and C, now it's time. We are following procedures. I'm trying to voice that very politely, but that's my thoughts, and I'll kind of walk
Yeah.
away at this point.
I think that now that this discussion is out there, you would know if you would have had a conversation with staff or council member or somebody saying, I viewed that as inappropriate or this or that. So I would say that this didn't come without warning. It may seem like it, but
Yeah,
we don't have a formal, and we won't be adopting a formal, okay, like 3 strikes, or like you would if you're an employee and
Okay.
you have a grievance process.
Okay.
But I would say that, and I know, read the paper articles, I saw the
Well, I'm not
thing.
trying to,
It's just.
I'm trying to be careful and
there
not go into
is-
that, because that's not my business. I'm just
Okay.
trying to talk about
But
the rules.
someone would know if
Well,
that was going to.
can I just follow up to
That
that?
was raised with them.
So if there's no interest in putting in a grievance policy or process in here, can we at least define discipline?
I'll have to talk to the city attorney again, that he's the one that came up with the template, and I think wanted it to be broad, sort of saying what that would mean. Unfortunately, it just goes to that. It could be for any reason or no reason, but I hope you would have faith that that's not generally how it works. It's generally that there is a reason, but.
Yeah, and I don't think the questions are around the reasoning. It's just having a formal.
discipline mean?
Exactly. It's just having a definition so that everybody's on the same page. And especially when somebody comes onto the commission, they know what they're agreeing to. And if something happens, then it's written down. And again, just to your point, protects everyone.
And I think, to be a little more boring about it, our commission is composed of, 5 city council appointees, as Commissioner Cycle had pointed out earlier. And so the section saying that each person appointed by city council shall serve at the pleasure of council, yet the disciplinary measures kind of apply commission-wide. So is there a process? Do our county appointees enjoy greater protection, or?
This has a the appointed body, so, for
And-
example, Commissioner Faircloth and myself could be disciplined by county commissioners.
So is there, but then, the complaint process would be by the city to the county? I don't know, it seems a little strange, and we're a little bit unique as a board because we have hybrid composition.
Right. Well, the resolution that was passed was by our city council, and it does talk about appointed by the council. But I would say that this would mean, yes, there would be a discussion with the
County commission.
county, but I also, it wouldn't happen in a vacuum. I'm sure the member there would have been something raised without there being a formal process saying that outburst or this, that, or something else that was public decorum or interaction with the public. It would have been raised, and I don't think it would come as they probably would be, whoever would be warned, we're going to have a discussion with the appointing body. And then you'd probably be able to have an opportunity to discuss that with the appointing body. But I will talk to, again, this is the language from the template that other boards are all adopting. It was meant to be general, but I can see what we can say about discipline, but I would just, it's probably broad.
And I think it's fine to be broad. I'm not against the language.
The only other thing I could think is, and I don't know, did you share the resolution? So again, I said there was one resolution that said, here's the general rules, guidance, and it has a little bit more on what's decorum, what's ethics. It's what city council has to follow. And so if that helps to look at, I think they adopted, I think this, attached to this are updated rules. I don't know, Will, if you could, just scroll down. I think there's here, and maybe if you could look at this to see if you feel like, okay, I see where something would fall into this, might rise to the level of a reason to be spoken to.
Right, but you're describing rising to a level. So I completely understand serving at the pleasure of a body, right? That makes complete sense to me. You know, city council, you know, interviews, will you please serve? Okay, I no longer serve. That makes sense. Disciplining someone at the pleasure of a body doesn't make as much sense to me.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like, I
I
just,
think
I
a
feel.
disciplining would be a warning of these things
Well,
are
well, that's what I'm saying.
happening.
Like, discipline, to me, you're disciplining someone based on something,
Right,
not at the pleasure.
okay. Well, I'll talk to Brad Branham about it, because that was his sort of, I don't know whether it would be, you can't, you know, don't do that again, that kind of thing, or this was, it may be staff or somebody saying, you know, or even the chair saying, that's, you're out of order. That doesn't happen very often, but,
But even
this
then,
is saying
but
the
even then, it
appointing
sounds like
body.
there's cause, right? Serving at, you can serve at the pleasure, meaning with or without cause. That makes sense to me. But being disciplined without cause doesn't make sense to me.
well, this one doesn't have the language about serving at the pleasure. So it's sort of, it's one and the same. It's saying you can be removed, or you can be disciplined. Yes, probably if you're disciplined, there's cause. You can be removed for, again, any reason. But they're good questions. And I realize that where they're coming from too. So let me just see if there's something we can do to clarify that. But this is, I don't really know that there's, so these rules have to be everybody has to sign on to these template rules, and this is what they are. So I guess we can have a comment that you wish that this was, the discipline part was more clear, but I've yet to have a board say we're not going to adopt those rules, because they really are the city council's rules that everybody needs to follow. A template that was adopted through this process. Yeah.
Any other,
I understand. And maybe I'm just, in jobs I've worked in, situations I've been in, discipline is a financial word too. I'm not suggesting that that's what the city's doing, but I don't like just leaving it like, you know, is there a swear jar for $1 in it? Like, you know, what? Anyway, I'll drop it.
I think it's, yeah, this has been helpful feedback. Are there other questions about sections in the
Yeah, I have a
proposal?
question about 3B, term length. It says, yeah, if you want to get to 3B there.
Oh, it references
It says
the,
members may be eligible for reappointment after being off the commission for 1 year. But on the resolution passed under terms, it says unless otherwise provided, where does it say it? Yeah, number 2 under terms, unless otherwise provided for by law, the length of service on all boards and commissions shall be limited to 2 full successive terms. I'm just curious about what does the 1 year in between terms mean?
So like if you serve 2 successive terms, then you take a year off, you can serve 2 more successive terms?
No, it says all members shall serve, it's a maximum of 2 terms, but then it says 1 year in between, basically, is what was how I'm reading it.
That's how I'm reading it as well. I was going to bring that up. My guess is that wasn't the intent, is that it's 2 terms and a year between.
Right.
But it doesn't read that way.
we have had members that did their 2 terms, but then that was it, but then they came back. So I can clarify, because it's not like forever, because we've had commissioners that have, you know, come back. It's more than, they need a break, more than a year break, but it would be at least that.
I think it just needs, for the line, all members
clarify
shall
it?
serve 3 years, serve 3-year terms with the allowance for 2 terms afterwards, you must wait a year or longer, something like that.
Yeah, it does.
Maximum of 2 successive terms?
It says all members shall serve a maximum of 2 terms,
Right.
is what B1 says. So maximum of 2 terms, doesn't say successive. And then
Right,
the-
I'm wondering, I think it's supposed to be successive terms, and then, let's see, let me see if was it added language about the being able to serve after 1 year, or is that, let me see.
That's before B1, it's like the header.
Yeah, it is added
Kind of
language.
strange it's there.
It is added.
Maybe the discipline is you have to serve extra terms.
I think it could also be helpful in the sentence that says members may be eligible for reappointment after being off of the commission for members may be eligible for reappointment after serving 2 3-year successive terms after taking a year off, right? Like just making that more clear.
Okay. I can do that because I see that confusion. Because I know that's what it is, serve a maximum. We should really just say the first maximum of 2 successive terms, and then say, but they may be eligible for reappointment after a year, after completion of those. I'll work on that. I agree with you. It's not clear.
I was also wondering how B1 would apply if you step into a partially completed term.
I think in practice, it's been 2 consecutive full terms, and the initial partial term doesn't count towards
right.
that 2-term, but that should be, that's a good point, that should be clarified.
It is,
That's
and
in
it
the
is
ordinance.
clarified in the ordinance. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the procedures.
I thought because your old language, I thought filling unexpired terms it's under the,
Yeah, it's
it's under the officers and duties. but
2E.
That's the chair, and the vice chair, okay, that's not.
It's in the
Yeah.
resolution as 2 full successive terms plus any unexpired term to which a member is appointed. So,
In the planning and zoning one?
in the council resolution.
But that's, all right, that's not the way the template read.
But that's
Okay,
what's,
let me I'll take it from these rules to clarify. I'll do it the same place there. Thank you, because we're working on this template as we speak, and that is confusing. So take this from, what's that section of the?
And this is just a technical question for my own knowledge. Between the 3-year terms, does it just roll over? Do you have to be reappointed to that second term?
Yeah, you have to be reappointed by council to serve another term.
Okay, that's why I think the language confused me in the change, because it does say the word reappointment.
Mhm. Reappointment's not automatic. It is, typically the member will express an interest in reappointment, and then but council doesn't have to. But I don't know how it applies to the county, whether, does the county reappointed?
Yeah, they contacted me and asked if I was interested or not. I said yes, then they had to revote to reappoint me. I didn't have to show up again and do an interview again, but.
I have a question on page 1. At the end, at the bottom, there's some added language around adjourning the meeting. The chair can declare the recess and adjourn meetings unless a member objects. So, I mean, one question is, does the chair have the power to adjourn a meeting at any time, even if the applicant doesn't agree or doesn't want that? And it's almost seems like there's just some missing information around how, when we can adjourn, and if there's a time limit, or if there's, a limit of things on the agenda. That just seemed kind of thrown in there.
Yeah, in meeting with some of these committees, the new committees, all of a sudden I was like, yeah, how do we usually adjourn? It's not a problem, but they were all voting to adjourn, and I'm like, you don't have to all vote to adjourn. So that's talking about the final, when the chair says we're adjourned, then you don't all have to vote to say, yes, we're adjourned. Maybe we do that.
We do.
But apparently, somebody could say, and this is probably from Robert's Rules of Order, I think we want to continue, we want to keep talking about this, and then you'd have to vote to say whether you want to adjourn or not. But it's not really a matter of, the chair would not be able to adjourn during a public meeting to say, I just don't want to. Is that what you're saying, something about?
I mean, could the chair adjourn between items and say, we're going to push this to the next meeting?
We'd probably have to do
Well, you'd have to.
motion to
You'd have
continue.
to. So if we're like really late into the night, like that one night we had, then you could ask to continue, but usually the applicant would have to agree to continue. It's not sort of just a sole discretion of the chair, but yet the chair has to keep meetings moving along and might have to set time limits, certainly is able to set time limits.
Does the applicant have to agree to a continuance, or is it that's just an action by the board, right? I mean, generally, we seek concurrence with the applicant, but is that actually required?
We generally, you'd have to have a reason. I mean, that is one of the things, you can always move to continue for more information, and often they don't like that. And then, well, that's when it's going to go up to city council, right? There's that one that you can reject it, or you could approve it, or you can move to continue. And I think in that case, even if you move to continue, the applicant could still say, well, then we'll count that as a no vote, and I want to go ahead to council. So.
And on the other hand, even if the applicant wants to continue it, we can still vote on it.
Correct.
As in the quasi-judicial case that they kept trying to kick down the road month after month, we eventually just said, we gotta talk about this.
Yeah, we don't have to grant a request to continue if we're
But you're
prepared
saying,
to.
do they have to agree to it?
I think if they retain rights to advance to council without a recommendation from this body, why would they need to assent to a continuance?
Well, I think if it was quasi-judicial, they'd have to agree, but no, probably not. You could continue it. But the only time I can think of when they don't want to continue is they want to go on to council because you're doing a recommendation, so.
Would it matter if the public hearing was already opened or not? Like, the public hearing's open, they have to agree to a continuance, but if we don't get to their item and it's 2 in the morning, but they want us to keep going, but everyone's falling asleep, we haven't gotten to the public hearing yet, maybe then we could continue without their
You
consent?
could continue because that's sort of the meeting,
Yeah.
The meeting has, by that time, people aren't able to make good decisions, so that the chair is saying, we're going to continue. I mean, to a certain extent, if they're represented by council, that, it could impact their, money that they're spending, but I think you have the right to do that.
Any other
I have
questions?
heard of other boards, maybe it's Buncombe County, someone told me this, that their meetings are capped at 6 hours. I don't have that hard and fast evidence, but I have been told that that is a practice. So I would be very much in favor of that. I think our minds get a little frayed by the end when you get past 6 hours, and it's not good for anyone. It's definitely not in the public good. But that's just my opinion.
Yeah, I would agree, and maybe it can be sort of general guidance. There may need to be some flexibility where it's not like you get to 6:01 and the meeting's over, but certainly we talked in the pre-meeting about agenda management as a function of that, so that's certainly something that, but I agree, spelling that out, I mean, in the general guidance, there was a notion that public comment could be limited to 30 minutes. It wasn't like a hard and fast rule. We've generally gone with an hour, so but that didn't end up in our new rules of procedure, so curious if that seemed relevant or not, as well as I would agree with kind of an overall time cap. I do appreciate.
Which section are we in where you, so you would want to add a time cap? Because I'm trying to think, I guess I can go into these, because I know council has particular special rules about that. So under the chair?
Probably. The chair reserves the right to.
Or the meeting structure section. There's kind of, procedure and agenda. One thing I appreciate is a kind of something we were wrestling with earlier. There's a little bit of a caveat that's being proposed to allow for exception to the chair restrictions. That seems wise, especially if there's potentially no one that meets that, or only one person that meets that definition.
Yeah, I added that in because
So
I thought, there was the
that's good.
question about the vice chair, having to meet those exact same rules, and it just seemed like, well, it might even be difficult sometime for a chair to meet those exact same rules, so, yeah, just adding that in unless otherwise agreed.
Any other questions or comments? It feels like this is headed for continuance and then review at
Yeah,
our
we
next
can-
meeting, so.
Since you have so many questions, I can try to clarify these. I mean, those boards that don't have any rules, I know that the requirement is to have it approved by January 1st, but since I'm combining your existing ones, and you do cover all the usual things, I'll work on clarifying what we've discussed, and, because they're good points, and I'll double-check the rules, because those might have better language than the template did.
Just one quick comment before I forget. Under attendance, on page 4, the 12-month period, I think it would be helpful to define what 12-month period. Like, are we looking at any 12-month period, or are we looking January 1 to December 31?
Or it could be related to your appointment.
Right. So just, if there is guidance on that, it would be helpful to add it.
Good point. And my last little comment is in the Section 7 amendments. There's a provision that the commission shall review these rules of procedure annually. It seems like best practice, but typically there's a caveat that failure to do so does not nullify the rules,
We'll probably have to set up a meeting now, because this is what all boards are supposed to do. So we'll probably have to mark that as a time.
annual
to
meeting.
the annual
Yeah.
meeting to go over things. And if, maybe the template's going to be updated, and then that would be a time to update it. It's hard to imagine that they will need an update annually, but these rules, again, this board has, I think they're in a lot better shape than they were a long time ago, and again, specific to what a planning board does. But as you see the difficulty of trying to write something so generally. You guys are good, these are good questions of like, but that's too general, and we want to understand, so. But that is something that I think we at least will attempt to say, here's our day to review the rules, or next month we're going to review, does anybody have any, edits to them? But now you can't make an amendment to the rules without it being approved by the city attorney. So
Shall we make a motion to
you
continue?
you can continue.
I'll make
and
a,
I'll make these edits.
I'll make a motion to continue this item to date certain, January 7th, 2026.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, the item's been continued. And with that, we have concluded our formal agenda. I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Our next meeting is January 7th, 2026, at 5 p.m. right here in this room. Happy New Year. See you all next year.